Hello, this is Kevin Trainer. Welcome to part two of the tutorial for the pagination coding assignment that's part of the Easy University tutorial project. And in part one, um, which you should go do if you haven't already done, what we did is we loaded test data that's going to allow us to test our pagination features. And we decided to add more instructors and more students. And we've added 125 of each. And so when we do the instructor list and when we do the student list, we should get about 6 pages of instructors or students. Okay, and we did that with migrations. Okay, so what do we have to do to the application to make it uh, take on these pagination features? Well, here's what we're going to do. Together, we're going to work on instructor list. And then on your own, when we're done with instructor list, you're going to use a cloning approach and you're going to add these features to student list. Okay. All right. So what do we have to do for instructor list? Well, the think of the flow through Django. It begins with urls.py. It goes on to views.py, and then we load and we render the template from the view. Okay. Is there a change to urls.py? No. Is there a change to views.py? Yes. Is there a change to templates, to the template for this, for the instructor list? Yes. All right, so let's go look at views.py. Okay, let's make the code a little bit bigger. Okay, and look, I'm right here at the instructor list view, and you can see that we do something really pretty quick. Uh, it's a class-based view. It's a subclass of the view superclass. We do a renderer, and when we're building the context, what do we put in the context? Well, we put in one dictionary to hold our data. So the data is the query set with all the instructors, and the name we associate with that with is instructor list. Okay, so that's pretty straightforward. Um, let's see the code we're going to replace it with. That's more complex. So we're just going to take this instructor list view and we're going to paste over top of it. And you can see we've got a lot more code. Here's the top here. Okay, now we're missing some imports. We're using a paginator class. I'm going to do an alt return on that to do the import. Page not an integer is an exception. Import that. Empty page, import that. Okay, so now I've got all the imports. All right. Okay, so still we're only implementing the get because it's just a list, right? There's no reason to implement the post. We just have to implement the get, and we're going to do it in a fancier way. Now we've got 3 instance variables that are feeding some settings to pretty general code. I must have accidentally touched that. Yeah. So, what are the settings that we're putting into these three instance variables? Well, the page kwarg or keyword argument is the word page. A paginate by is the number of rows we want to use up on a particular page. The limit is 25 per page. That's why we're going to get 6 pages because we added 125. That's exactly 5 pages, but we had some to begin with. Those will push us onto 6. And the template name is, of course, the good old instructor list.html. Okay, so what do we do here? Well, let's get down into the code. We come into the get method. We retrieve a query set with all the instructor objects in it into a variable called instructors. And then we wrap instructors in a paginator object. Okay, so what that's going to allow us to do is to get the right features, right, from this paginated query set. Okay, and this really gets us to the approach that Django takes to pagination, and it's this: paginate the data source. Okay, the query set is the data source. Instructors has all the instructors in it. Okay, what does the paginator do? Well, it serves up subsets of the query set, each of them representing a page. And we'll see how we use that in a couple more lines of code. Okay, so we take a page number and we do a get out of the request, and we ask for the page keyword argument. Okay, so the request is going to have the number of the page that we want to get. We're pulling it out of the request. Okay, that's fine. So we do a try. This is the simple case. We say that the page object, we say we want to use the paginator. That's a wrapper around our query set. And page is going to return just our part of the query set that's our page, and we pass it the page number. So this is going to work really well. Okay, this is going to be the good case. The try is going to work if, in fact, we have a multi-page list of instructors and the page number has been passed in the request. So maybe it's page number 3. Okay, so what happened is that the paginator finds the subset of the instructors in the query set, and it serves them up in a new query subset called page. Okay. What happens if page is not an integer? If we didn't get in a proper page number from the request, well, then we're going to ask for page 1. Okay. If we have an empty page exception, we are going to ask for the last page. Okay. And again, in each case, the page variable is going to be holding the subset of the instructors, the kind of paged query set that's going to have the data in it for the instructors we want on our page. Now, the next two things that we do, part of our pagination is that if appropriate, we're going to have a link to the previous page. Okay, so we're going to need a URL for that, and then we put that into a variable called prev URL. And then if it's appropriate to have a next page, well, then we put the URL for that in to next URL. Okay, so how do we find out if the page has a previous? Well, we call has previous. That's all we have to do. Okay, so we say with the page that we are currently on, does it have a previous page? If it does, we build the URL for the link of the previous page. If the page has a next, we build the URL for the link to the next page. If not, we populate those prev URL and next URL with a none. Okay, now this is really good design because the decisions about pagination are being done in the view. And what goes on in the template? The template is pretty dumb. All the template is going to ask is, first of all, it's going to ask, is this a paginated page? If it is, then it's going to display the content for pagination, right? If it has the previous URL, then it's going to put in the content for that. Then it's always going to put in the page number. And if it has a next URL, it's going to put in the content for that. So the decision making about pagination is done in the view, and that's in model view controller. That's where decision making goes on. Okay. And then what does the template do? Well, it just sort of interprets the instructions that came from the view. If this is a paginated page, then we put in that content. If not, we don't. Okay, so what's passed in the context? Well, is paginated. This is a Boolean that is going to tell the template whether it should put out the pagination content at the end of the page. And how do we get that Boolean? Well, we call has other pages on the page object. Okay. The next page URL, we just give it the variable next URL, which either has a none or it's been populated with the URL. Okay, we pass the paginator. Okay, this is going to give us access to our page number, among other things. The previous page URL, it's the same deal as the next page. And the instructor list, this is what we were originally passing to the template. Well, that's just the page. So what is the page? The page is a list of instructors. It's a subset of the query list that we had before. Does it have additional features? Yeah, because it's a subclass of the query set class. So it has additional features for pagination. Okay, but does it have the query set functionality? It does, because it has a superclass that is a query set. So what we were passing before was a more traditional query set object. What we're passing now, the page, is just a fancier, more functional query set object. Okay, pretty cool. And then we return render the request, the template name, and the context. Pretty cool, huh? So, are we done yet? No, we're not done yet. Why? Because we haven't changed the template yet. Okay, let's go find the template for instructor list. Instructor list. Okay, let's look at this. Okay, so what would happen if we didn't change this at all? Would we still get the data on the page? Okay, so where do we get the data from? Well, we get it from this query set object called instructor. So what did we just pass in? Well, I'm sorry, not instructor. It's a query set object called instructor list, right? And then the for is what pulls each of the instructors out of the instructor list. What did we pass? Well, we passed an object that we named instructor list, and this has our page in it. So even if we run this right now, okay, this is still going to work. Let's try that. Let's run manage py.task. Okay, and let's make sure that we have our migrations done. So let's show the migrations. Okay, it's done all the way up through 10, so we have it. Let's run the server. Okay, port already in use. We might be okay. Oh no, we don't want to do that. So let's try it again. So let's try to run the server again. Alright, so that worked. Alright, and let's pull this down and look at it. So let's go to instructors. And what's interesting here is we did get a page full of data. Okay, so it's still coming through in a data structure that we passed in the context with the identifier instructor list. It's just not the whole list anymore. It's a page of it. Okay. Well, what about the pagination stuff? Well, we haven't added that to the template yet, so we're not seeing it. Okay. So let's go fix the template. Okay. Let's get some room in here. Let's go fix the template. Add some code, right? And then we're going to see what gets done here. So let's find instructor list in the other code. Here we are. And we just have another part to add down here underneath the content that we're already putting out. And let's I don't know why that's turning out that way. Let me give this let me find that error and I'll be right back. I found it. I forgot to paste the last of my new lines in here. That was my problem. Sorry about that, guys. Alright, so let's take a look at this code. Alright, so this is down at the bottom of the page. Okay, this is all part of this block called content. Okay, so it's at the bottom of that block, and we ask if it is paginated, then we're going to put out the pagination part of the content. If it's not paginated, we're not even going to display this. Okay, and then as we display it, okay, if previous page URL, okay, now how does this work? Well, it turns out that in this kind of a variable, the if it determine the if will interpret the variable the value none as false. Okay, so when we populate it, we either put the URL or none. If we put the URL, we're going to render the previous link. Okay, if we populate it with a none, we're not going to do any of that. Okay, so then we're going to get the page number. Okay, so how are we going to figure this out? Okay, so the reason that we passed the paginator is we would like it to say page blippo of blappo. Okay, if we want to get just the number of our current page, we can just call on the method number on the instructor list object, and again, it's a fancy query set. It knows the number of the page that it has. But if we want to know the total number of pages, the only way we can do that is to call on the paginator object, which holds all the pages, and ask for num pages. Okay, that gives us the num pages. Okay, so that gives us page 1 of 6. Okay, and then again we test if we have a next page URL. And again, if you populated it with the value none, then we're not going to do this. If we populated it with a URL, then we'll put that content out. Okay, so what's nice here is that there's conditional logic here, but it's all based on decisions that were made in the view, right? So in model view controller, the most functional of those three pieces is the view, right? The I'm sorry, what I misspoke, okay? Because in Django, okay, and if I said this a little bit earlier, please erase that from your mind. In Django, the controller part of the classic model view controller architecture is the combination of the urls.py and views.py. Okay, that's the controller. Okay, we use different names. Okay, the model we call the model. Okay, the view, the classic model view controller view, is what the template does, right? So when I'm saying that when we do it in the Django views.py, we do it the right way. Well, why is that right? Well, because that is the controller component from the classic model view controller architecture. So the controller makes all the decisions, okay, and the view just kind of prints them out, okay, and the template takes over the view function. It's a shame that these names are different in Django, but that's what the mothers and fathers of Django wanted, so that's what we got. Okay, so my point here is that the decisions should be made in views.py, and so then the conditional code that winds up in the template is kind of very much yes, no stuff. We've already kind of sent uh, all the information that you need to make the yes or no decisions about what parts of this we're going to render. We've already decided in views.py how to get that done. And just to say it one more time, the classic model view controller architecture, the brains and all the decisions go on in the controller part. And in Django, what parts of Django implement the controller part? Well, urls.py and views.py. Okay? And to the extent that I conflated those a little bit earlier, my apologies. Okay, so we've got this. This should be pretty much what we need to get done. Okay, so let's go back to the server and let's click on instructors and see if we get a paginated page. You know, it looks like we do. I'm going to make it, yeah, here we are. So we've got down at the bottom, we've got the footer, and then on top of the footer, it says page 1 of 6, and then there's a link for next. Is there a link for previous? No, because there's only one page. I mean, there's no previous page. There's no page 0. Okay, let's click on next. 2 of 6. See, the previous has jumped up because there's the page 1 to go back to. See? All right, so let's work our way out. 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And 6, it's a short page because, again, we added 125 instructors, and they filled out those 5 pages. They filled out 5 of the pages, and now we get back to the 4. We had 4 before we loaded those 125, so 4 wind up on the last page because we have 25 on a page. Okay, and again, we have a link for previous. It says page 6 of 6, but we don't have a link for next because there is no next. Very nice. Okay, so before I finish up here, I just want to test. Okay, does it do the right thing when I don't have enough instructors to have pagination? What if I back out that instructor test data, go back to having 4 instructors? Am I going to have any of this pagination related content at the bottom of my page? I should not. So let's go and test that that's actually true. So I'm going to stop the server. Okay, I'm going to show migrations. Okay, and I'm applied all the way through 10. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to back out both 9 and 10 because you have to do them in order. So I'm going to go back to 8, and then I won't have any of the new instructor or student data in there. So I'm going to say migrate, course info, 3 zeros and an 8. Oh, missing 1 0 and an 8. Okay, so that's been backed off. Okay, let's do a run server. All right. And let's go to instructors. And again, there's just 4 instructors, no pagination related content at all. Why? In this case, it's not because the logic isn't included. It's that the logic was able to figure out that we can render this all with a single page. Okay, so when we went to the code in the template, we went to code that said if is paginated, that was false. So we didn't put any of this pagination content out at all. Okay, so that's how to do the instructor. All right, you should have everything that you need to go ahead and do the same thing for the student list. So I'm going to turn you loose to do that and wish you luck, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.